The history of the Dominion of Newfoundland during the First World War is punctuated by moments of profound collective trauma. Yet few narratives offer as stark a concentration of loss as that of the Ayre family of St. John's. On July 1st, 1916, the opening day of the Battle of the Somme, this prominent merchant family suffered the loss of 4 of its members. 2 brothers, Captain Eric Stanley Ayre and Captain Bernard Pitts Ayre, and their first cousins, 2nd Lieutenant Gerald Walter Ayre and 2nd Lieutenant Wilfred Douglas Ayre. While 3 of these kinsmen fell during the infamous disaster at Beaumont-Hamel with the 1st Battalion of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, the 4th, Bernard, perished while leading a company of the Norfolk Regiment in the relatively more successful, but equally lethal, assault near Montauban. Their sacrifice was not merely a private family tragedy, but a public emblem of the devastation visited upon the Water Street merchant elite, where the loss of an entire generation of potential leaders permanently altered the trajectory of the Dominion.
To analyze the military service of the Ayre Quartet, one must first locate them within the rigid socio-economic hierarchy of pre-war St. John's. The family's presence in Newfoundland was established in the mid-19th century through the immigration of the Honorable Charles Robert Ayre from Exeter, Devon. Starting as a clerk at Benjamin Bowring and Sons, Charles Robert eventually co-founded Ayre and Steer in 1859. The 4 kinsmen represented the 3rd generation of this merchant dynasty, raised in the affluent Brookdale and Circular Road areas of St. John's.
The educational trajectory of the 4 heirs was typical of the Newfoundland elite, characterized by a transition from local schooling to prestigious English institutions. Wilfred Douglas Ayre, the youngest of the group, and his brother Ronald attended the Leys School in Cambridge, an institution that became a second home to several Ayre cousins. Eric Stanley Ayre also completed his formal schooling at the Leys before returning to St. John's to assume a management role in the family firm by 1910. Gerald Walter Ayre followed a slightly different path, attending Rossall College in England, another elite public school that emphasized the Victorian virtues of athleticism and military discipline. Bernard Pitts Ayre represented perhaps the greatest academic potential of the quartet. After graduating from the Leys, he enrolled at Jesus College, Cambridge, where he took an honors degree in medicine. His athletic prowess was equally noted. He earned a blue for lacrosse at Cambridge, a feat that signaled his status as a leader among the imperial youth.
When Great Britain declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914, the response in St. John's was immediate. Wilfred Douglas Ayre was one of the first to volunteer, joining the Newfoundland Regiment in September 1914. He was part of the first 500. Due to a shortage of khaki cloth in the colony, the initial recruits were issued puttees made from blue fabric, a distinction that would later mark them as the founding members of the regiment. He sailed for Europe aboard the SS Florizel on October 4, 1914. Photos from this period show Wilfred in training camps in Scotland, smiling atop a pyramid of friends, a snapshot of innocence taken before the harsh realities of the Western Front were fully realized. While Wilfred was training with the First Wave, Eric Stanley Ayre was playing a crucial role on the home front. As an established director in the family business, Eric's initial responsibilities involved recruiting and training new drafts for the regiment in St. John's.
Bernard Pitts Ayre's service record offers a distinct departure from that of his kinsmen. Because he was already in England studying medicine when the war broke out, he joined the British Army directly rather than returning to Newfoundland. Correspondence written by Bernard to his mother from the trenches between 1915 and 1916 reveals a man deeply engaged with the welfare of his troops and the daily struggles of life in the line. One fellow officer noted that Bernard began attacks in a characteristic fashion, smoking his pipe and using a walking stick to direct his men forward.
The spring of 1916 was a period of intense reorganization and training for the Allied forces as they prepared for the big push on the Somme. For the Newfoundlanders, this meant a transition from the failed campaign at Gallipoli, where they had served at Suvla Bay and during the evacuation, to the vastly different landscape of the Western Front. Gerald Walter Ayre joined the 1st Battalion in the field in mid-June 1916, having recently arrived from the depot at Ayre, Scotland. He was just in time for the final preparations. The sector assigned to the 29th Division was the heavily fortified village of Beaumont-Hamel, a position that the Germans had reinforced with deep concrete dugouts and extensive wire entanglements.
The morning of July 1st, 1916, at Beaumont-Hamel is remembered as the most tragic hour in Newfoundland history. The plan called for the 29th Division to capture the village after a massive artillery bombardment and the detonation of a 40,000-pound mine under the Hawthorne Ridge redoubt. However, the decision to fire the mine at 7:20 a.m., 10 minutes before the general advance, proved fatal. The delay allowed German machine gunners to occupy the lip of the crater and prepare for the incoming waves of British and Newfoundland infantry. The first two waves of the attack were decimated almost immediately. At 8:45 a.m., the Royal Newfoundland Regiment received the order to advance from their reserve positions at St. John's Road. Because the frontline trenches were blocked with casualties, the Newfoundlanders were forced to climb over the top into the open, facing a clear downhill slope in full view of German machine guns.
Captain Eric Stanley Ayre led D Company forward, his pistol raised as he waved his men toward the German lines. He was killed during the advance, falling near the Danger Tree, a blighted apple tree that marked the midpoint of no man's land and the apex of the German fire zone. Second Lieutenant Wilfred Douglas Ayre was also killed in this sector. His death, alongside his cousins, illustrates the microcosm of grief that the Ayre family represented. Of the 801 members of the regiment that entered the battle that morning, only 68 remained to answer the roll call the following day. Second Lieutenant Gerald Walter Ayre, aged 25, fell in the same morning's carnage. The retrieval of Gerald's remains became a source of enduring mystery and distress for his family. Reports in his personnel file indicate that another soldier stole Gerald's revolver, holster, and identification disc. Gerald's body was never formally identified on the battlefield, and his name was eventually inscribed on the Beaumont-Hamel Memorial for those with no known grave.
While the 29th Division was being slaughtered at Beaumont-Hamel, the 18th Division, further to the south, achieved one of the day's few tactical successes. The 8th Norfolk Regiment, including Captain Bernard Pitts Ayre, took part in the attack near Montauban. Bernard Ayre led his company into the fray with his trademark pipe and stick, directing his men through the blooding of Kitchener's army. Bernard was killed in the action. He was 24 years old. His death, occurring on the same morning as his brother Eric and his cousins Gerald and Wilfred, meant that Robert Chesley and Gertrude Ayre's only two sons had perished within hours of each other. The tragedy reached St. John's in a series of agonizing telegrams. For Lydia Gertrude Pitts, already a widow, the double blow of losing both Eric and Bernard was irreparable. The Evening Telegram and the Daily News chronicled the tragedy, which became a focal point for the colony's grief. The personal artifacts left behind provide a haunting insight into this grief. In Wilfred's effects, a packet of 7 negatives was found that had never been processed until nearly 100 years later. These images showed a vibrant young man in training, unaware of the fate that awaited him at Beaumont-Hamel.
In a dominion with a population of only 240,000, the loss of over 700 men in a single morning was a demographic catastrophe. Gerald Walter Ayre's brother, Charles R. Ayre, survived the war, as did Wilfrid's brother, Ronald Ayre, who served with distinction in the Royal Flying Corps. These survivors were tasked with carrying on the family business in an era of post-war economic depression.
The Methodist College in St. John's became the primary site of domestic commemoration for the family, where Gerald and Eric had once excelled in football and cricket. The Ayre Athletic Grounds were also named in memory of the Ayre family, as was Pitt's Memorial Drive in St. John's, honoring the maternal side of the quartet.
Their names continue to serve as a poignant microcosm of the 19,240 British and Allied dead who perished on that beautiful summer morning in 1916.